G'day and welcome to another massive edition of the RDFNL Footy Show. All thanks to our friends at Ontime Delivery Solutions. My name's Andy. I'm joined by Tara Murray. You had your week off. You got a chance to kick back and relax a bit, but it was still a great weekend of footy.
It was. That's what. Even though I had the week off, I was still paying attention to what was happening across not just the RDFL but all the leagues I cover, and there was some good matches that went ahead.
Yeah, it's hard not to pay attention to it during footy season. Even when you were overseas, going back a few years ago, I know you were all over it, like you were watching the games. But we saw some great games over the weekend, and a game that we probably expected Centrals to challenge. They certainly put up a bit of a fight against Diggers Rest.
Look, obviously the margin was a 53-point win to Diggers Rest, but it was probably a closer margin that we've seen in the last few years between these two sides. Diggers Rest has normally smashed Melton Centrals, and this was a lot closer. It was the middle two quarters that proved to be the difference when the Boroughs were able to get on top, and they had a few different options up forward. You had Cam McCabe kick 6, where up for Melton Centrals they only had single goal kickers, so they couldn't get any multiple goal kickers out there. And Matt Krell, who can play all over the ground, who I know is one of the keys down back for the Boroughs in defence as well, was named their best. So, look, obviously you look at that, and they had Cole Laurie captaining the side while Tom Gleeson's overseas for a few weeks, so different look there, but a solid win by the Boroughs. Cam
McCabe's quite an interesting one. He's a good forward, midfield. He can play all over the place, but when he kicks bags, he can really kick bags, and he's probably not really seen as a main forward, is he?
That's it. He's kicked, I think he's kicked 8 in a couple of games, and he's kicked 6, so he's had quite a few bags this season, so he's not someone you're going to rely on week in, week out to kick your 4 or 5 goals, but he chips in when needed to, and you've seen that several times this season, and he can play forward, but you can also throw him in the midfield as well. It sort of shows that depth that the Boroughs do have. They have a number of options up forward and then a number of options in the middle as well.
So what does that result say about the Centrals?
Look, I think we all knew Centrals were getting closer this season, and we're sort of seeing it on the results. They are improving. This could have been a 150-point blowout last season, so it's about where we saw them. We always knew it was going to be a tough year for them. They didn't have the easiest draw, but they are showing that growth and development which we expected.
Sunbury Kangaroos kicked their highest score in recent times when they took on Broadford.
Look, this was always going to be an interesting one. I thought the Sunbury Kangaroos were going to bounce back, but this is probably their best all-round performance of the season. You look, 214 points. It's been probably a long time since they've kicked that. So they absolutely dominated. They had 27 scoring shots to 2 at half-time.
Wow.
So it could have actually been a lot bigger margin. You look, it was nearly 200 points, but if they kicked straight early in that first half, could have even been more. And they had several guys with who kicked multiple goals. Josh Bird just kicked 8, I think, for the second time this season. You had Jamie Cuff, the veteran, kicked 5. You had Mitch Streif kick 5. So it was a good percentage booster for the side. Little bit of a downside, they did have a couple of injuries, I believe, to Ty Cuff and Matthew Baird, so that does hurt them there, considering they're only starting to get players back. Daniel Gregory is one who returned from a knee injury this week, so it will be disappointing that way, but a percentage booster and something the Kangaroos needed if they're going to stay in touch with the top 6.
Is there a cause, I guess not to put a downer on it, but they've sort of been a little bit up and down. They come into this game on the back of a pretty heavy loss to Romsey the previous week. Where are the Kangaroos sort of sitting? The Kangaroos are lacking depth, and we always knew that was going to be the thing. They needed their top players performing week in, week out. And the minute they're not performing, they were going to struggle at times. And we've seen the highs. They beat Wood End Heskett a few weeks ago, which was a really good win, and they've had some good wins against these lower sides, but at times they have struggled, and they've had injuries to key players unavailable as well, which hasn't helped them, which we always knew depth was being the problem, and that's probably what we've seen in their results. Rupertswood had a pretty good win over Lancefield, but I think Lancefield shouldn't be too dissatisfied with that performance.
Look, I thought this margin may have been actually a bit wider than what it is.
It has been in the past.
Yeah, and Rupertswood has made a habit of smashing these lower base teams. So, look, you'd say from a Lancefield perspective, it was still a 100-point loss, but it could have been a lot worse than what we've seen in some of the results this year. But the Sharks did what they had to do. They've obviously got a few injury concerns. Nick Grigg didn't play after getting injured the week before, and Brett Chambers had surgery on a broken arm after also getting injured the week before. So there are a couple of big losses there for them, but they brought in some different players. Ed Whelan came in for his first senior game of the season and kicked 4. He had Luke Cannon kick 4 as well, and even like young guns for Lancefield. Alan Sinclair in his first senior game for the season was named their best. So it was some of those younger players that stood up in a game, and look, for the Sharks, they got the win. It's just making sure they're doing the things they have to do. Keep an eye out for Ed Whelan. He's a good star on the horizon. A couple of years ago he played over at Inverloch in the Interleague, and he was a quality forward and certainly did a lot of damage, so he's certainly one on the horizon to watch out for. Riddle had a comfortable win over Rockbank. I don't think there's anyone who can stop Riddle at the moment.
Yeah.
They've got an interesting match coming up this week, which will give us a good indication of where they sort of sit. But look, it was a one-way street, and that's what we've sort of seen with the Bombers the last few weeks. They've been smashing the top teams, so you feel sorry for these bottom teams that are copping it as well. You've got Hayden Ross kicked 8, Panicio kicked 6, and you had 13 players kick goals. So there was a lot of different players in the action for the Bombers.
Hayden Ross is an interesting one, almost like in the same form of Cam McCabe, a goal-kicking midfielder, and he's I think he's on the second in the goal-kicking so far this year, but he traditionally plays in the midfield, but he can run forward and kick goals.
And that's probably a good way to say it, similar to a Cam McCabe. Hayden's played forward when he's needed to. He's not your tall forward, and look, we've seen that the last couple of years that you don't have to be a tall forward to actually dominate in this competition. We saw Jason Cook take out the Bowen medal and was the leading goal kicker last year, and he's not your traditional key forward. We've even seen that probably Todd Podolak's another one this year. You got Cam McCabe, Hayden Ross, that they're not looking for those key forwards. Obviously Dylan Weir is a gun and he has started up forward for Melton Centrals, but teams are finding different ways and different avenues to goal, and Hayden has definitely been one of the stars for Riddle this season.
Are they missing big, bad, bustling Brian Ruffle?
Look, obviously, they've got different options, and that's what they're showing. Like, they've got different guys standing up. They'd love to have Brian Ruffle there, but obviously they didn't have him last season, so they've sort of grown as a side without him, and he's probably one that they don't have that him pictured in their side anymore, which they did for a number of years, which has shown how far this club has grown as the last couple of years.
I think a result may not have surprised too many, but the margin certainly did. Wallen comfortably accounting for Romsey.
I wasn't surprised there. We've seen Wallen has played really well against most sides. Romsey sort of has struggled against those top sides, and obviously Wallen being on top of the ladder, I'm not surprised there. You had 18 scoring shots to 3 in the second half from the Magpies, so they absolutely dominated that second half after a pretty even first half. And look, that's probably where you get the Redbacks are. They can match some of these good teams for a quarter and a half, but they can't go for that 4 quarters, and we quite saw that with the Magpies quite easily getting the win there.
Yeah, certainly an impressive performance there. What does that say about Romsey? They've been pretty good in the last sort of month, but that was a bit of a backward step for them.
They're around the mark to play finals, but there seems to be a gap between those top 4-5 teams and then the next 4-5 teams, and that's what we're probably seeing. And Romsey is one of those sides who will be fighting for the bottom, probably that last spot in the top 6, I'd say. The top 5 looks pretty set. It's sort of that 6th position, which they were fighting for last season, then they're fighting for again. So, and obviously one thing we're probably going to mention, we missed out on mentioning last week that Dan Nolan has been reappointed for 2 years out at the Magpies as well. So
exciting news.
There was a few rumours floating around that he might have been heading back to Craigieburn, but it's massive news out there for the Magpies, who are doing some brilliant things out there. So to have Dan back on board is massive for them.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And the final game, we saw Macedon retain the Bilton Cup over Woodend Heskett.
It is, and obviously I look at with that Macedon probably didn't capitalise on some of the opportunities they had earlier in the game, but it was a pretty physical contest, but they ended up getting the job done. You had Tommy Waters, who was awarded the Best on Ground medal in another dominant performance that we've seen from him for a number of years. And for the Magpies, the Cats, they keep just going about what they have to be doing. They're not necessarily winning by the big margins or having the pretty wins. They're doing what they need to do, so they're in a good spot come final time. For the Hawks, it's a little bit concerning now. They've lost 3 games in a row, and now they're sitting 6th with a number of teams chasing them. So, and they've got a tough draw the next couple of weeks as well. So it's probably after we saw the Hawks fly early in the season, they're sort of fallen that little bit. Obviously, some of these losses are coming to good sides. The Sunbury Kangaroos loss probably does hurt them, and the Romsey one early on, but they're not quite matching it with those top sides after that shock win against Diggers Rest a couple of weeks ago.
I think you're right about that Sunbury Kangaroos game. It has cost them because they came back in, they pushed Wallen to within sort of 3 goals or 3.5 goals, and then they pushed the Cats. There wasn't much separating the sides at 3/4 time, so there's certainly that potential there. It's maybe just that extra, maybe a bigger bodied midfielder or something like that, or an extra forward just to keep that pressure on.
Look, and obviously you look at it, they're sitting 6th at the moment, equal with Romsey, and Romsey's played 1 less game. So Romsey, that game is against Diggers Rest, which they would go in as underdogs, but it sort of brought them back to the pack, and it makes you think whether that Sunbury Kangaroos game they took a bit lightly after having a really, really good win against Diggers Rest. They thought, yep, this was going to happen, and it may have brought them a little back to earth. But look, I'm not writing off the Hawks yet. They've got some pretty exciting young talent there, and they are they are a better side than they have been the last couple of years, and they are continuing to build, but they need to get back on the winners list pretty quickly, especially considering I think they've got a couple of tough matches coming up.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, this show has the habit of causing some magic, and depending when you viewed this show, a challenge was put forward last week, and for those who've been viewing the social media, why don't you give us a bit of a background on what is taking place at Wallen if you're viewing this on Tuesday, July 3?
Well, last week, Yendi sort of slammed a mate of his out there at Wallen for missing a pretty easy goal. So, slammed Todd out there, and sort of there was a little social media backlash and a bit of fun. And so we got through out the idea, why not having a goal kick?
And it was your idea. We put that for the record.
I know, you were telling me how good the show was going. I'm like, well, why not keep going? You get in the banter, let's have a goal kicking contest.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing how this one goes. I haven't done any goal kicking practice. I haven't picked up a footy, so I'm in good form to win this one, I think. Look at the conditions outside. It's very windy today.
Well, it's windy at the best of times up there at Wallen, and I've heard you're well and truly you're the underdog going into this. So there could be a little bit of bragging rights on the line coming up with this goal kicking contest.
Yeah, well, I will say I'm going in with a bit of a minor injury, but
excuses.
No, it was a very good injury as well. It's been recovering it from it's a bit of a foot strain, and I think it's a foot strain. And I was trying to think, how did I get that toe strain? Well, I was wearing good work shoes, and I picked up a Sheridan and kicked the goal at the MCG. So I've been recovering from that. So my last shot at goal was actually straight through the high diddle at the MCG. Mind you, it was only 15 metres out with no breeze on a perfect day. So I'll happily take that. But the challenge was issued, and all the banter has gone out there, and I love it. I think that Wallen have really embraced it. I think it's going to be a bit of fun.
I do, and I think it's something that everyone should tune into later in the week. We'll put it up on the RDFL social media and the website as well. Add a little bit extra in this week, and I'll be interested to see what happens.
Yeah, exactly, Toddy. Look out, I'm gunning for you, mate. Thanks for jumping on board, Tara, and thanks to Ontime Delivery Solutions for all their great support. We'll look forward to catching up with everyone later in the week.
Thanks for having me.